And there's breaking news coming in. China has accused the United States of flouting trade rules with an inquiry into intellectual property. China says it has the strength to defend its national interests. It is the highest level contact between the two countries since the trade dispute began. This is the latest breaking news coming in. The United States China has accused the United States of flouting trade rules with an inquiry into intellectual property. China says that it has the strength to defend its national interests. It is the highest level contact between the two countries since the trade dispute began. As we all know that the US-China trade war is escalating by the day, and to give us more details on this news story, I'm now joined in by our correspondent Mohammed Saleh, live from the newsroom. Saleh, clearly the trade war between US and China is only growing further.
That's exactly correct, Akansha. Now, anyone who's been watching the developments over the course of the last several weeks, this was something that was expected. Now, first, let's put this in perspective. There are two separate issues which are actually playing out here. Firstly, what US President Donald Trump has said is that the United States suffers from a trade deficit of anywhere from $375 billion to what he says is almost a trade deficit of $500 billion with the Chinese companies which actually import goods into the United States. Now, firstly, what he did was he imposed tariffs of 25% and 10% on steel and aluminium imports, respectively, from China and several other countries into the United States. This is a separate issue. Now, what we saw play out on the Thursday announcement by Donald Trump, where he said that about $50 to $60 billion of imports will in fact be put in terms of tariffs on Chinese products which come into the United States, dates back to a dispute of intellectual property rights. Now, what has happened is this: over the course of the last several decades, every time US companies want to go and operate in China, they are duty bound via contracts that they sign to share technology. Now, this was something which US President Donald Trump, at the time when he was being elected to the office, he had said, look, this is completely unfair, this is unacceptable. The Chinese companies are not obligated when they operate in the United States with these sort of data sharing sort of practices which China imposes. So what he has done is, of course, impose these tariffs, import tariffs on Chinese goods. And what we saw yesterday was $3 billion of counter tariffs that were imposed by China on United States goods. These included the likes of steel pipes, wine, and even pork that is imported from the United States into China. Now, we've heard from Chinese officials, and what we've now heard, the latest, is that one of the highest decision-making bodies in China has come forth and said, look, if Donald Trump is looking for a trade war where tariff walls are in fact increased for import and export of groups, then China is more than capable of in fact going on and defending its own interests. Now, what we saw yesterday in terms of its announcement of $3 billion was almost a sort of a token protest, but now China seems to be hardening its stance. But considering the manner and also the protectionist rhetoric which Donald Trump has always employed ever since he began his campaigning, he come forth and said that he will make America great again. And one of the ways that he would do it is, of course, by rectifying and correcting some of these unfair trade practices that he said that America as a first world nation had gotten to over the course of the last 5-6 decades in the post-Second World War scenario. And so what we are now seeing is essentially the US and China which are having a go at each other in terms of the tariffs which either country imposes on goods which come into its own borders.
That also brings me to my next question, that a lot of economists are actually seeing merit in Trump's move, because they have to say that US cannot be blamed entirely for this trade war, and that it was China and its predatory trade practices which actually began the trade war.
It's much more complicated than this, Akansha, because let's put it this way. Trade is not a zero-sum game. It's not that if one were to gain, the other loses. Now, with the actions that Donald Trump has in fact resorted to, it is perfectly possible that trade in the United States may actually suffer by increasing the import tariffs on steel and aluminium, something that is so essential in virtually every industry that you can think of. Donald Trump could actually be leading to a situation where there is shortage of steel and aluminium, which could actually drive up prices in the United States. Now, China, for its part, has been accused of unfair trading practices. It's been accused of dumping its goods, opening up new markets in a way that has never been perhaps seen before in recent decades. So, yes, what Donald Trump, the intention is correct, but perhaps the mechanism and the manner in which he's gone ahead and tried to take on China may not exactly be the remedy for the situation that the United States finds itself in.